So we're into our winter retreat now for a couple of weeks. It's a Saturday night, one pra, double header here, 2 for 1. Actually, it's more like a 1 for 2. You only get one talk. But rainy night after a rainy several weeks. Coming together to be with each other, some meditation, chanting, and some reflections on Dhamma. As I mentioned at the beginning, when we were dedicating chanting, this is yesterday anyway, was the anniversary of my mother's death six years ago. And I spent a little bit of time today actually looking at some photos. We had put together a slideshow, my brother and my sister and I and various family members, nephews and nephews' partners, put together a slideshow at that time during the memorial service 6 years ago. And I was looking at that, and some of the photos of her life, a brief synopsis of her life in photos, and was once again struck once again at the variety of images and perceptions and people that constitute what it is that I call my mother. And all the way from some photos of her as a young girl and growing up into young adulthood, some photos of her on the beach, probably in her 20s or so. She had dark brown hair, and she actually, by conventional means, was a fairly attractive young woman, and big white teeth, and they used a lot of lipstick then, so she had big red lips. But seeing those photos, and then as she met my father, and there were some wedding photos and photos of the two of them together in their early years. And then moving on to when she started to have kids, with my baby pictures with my brother, her feeding him, and looking a little bit older herself, probably a bit tired, but lovingly feeding my brother when he was a baby. And then photos of the three of us, my brother, my sister, and myself. I was the last to come along, and photos of the three of us together as very young kids. With her. She was getting into her 30s. And then as she got a bit older, into her middle years and her later years, and photos of family together with her grandchildren, and some more of myself in my 30s or so. And then on to aging, her final years, and sickness, and finally a number of photos of her after she passed away in her bed in the nursing home, where she spent the last 6 weeks of her life. And just contemplating, who was she? Who was this woman whose name, Glendameria, I was named after her, which caused a lot of confusion for a lot of people when I was helping her out with her medicines over the online pharmacy and various things that I was doing for her. When I would call and say, yes, I'm calling for Glendameria. And they'd say, okay, well, what's your name? And I say, Glendameria. And they'd say, no, and what's your name? And I'd say, oh, I was named after my mother. people were sort of puzzled about that, except for one guy who said, "Oh, that is so cool, named after your mother." But anyway, a little aside there. Just thinking back over all of those things and contemplating who was this person, that we label as Glenda Maria. Is she that young girl on the horse, or the woman on the beach, or the young mother with 3 children in tow, or on through, the older woman in the wheelchair in her final days, and then the corpse, lifeless corpse in bed. And just realizing that we live in our world of perceptions, of labels, of constructions, of supposed realities, and the people that inhabit them are the same, in a sense, in terms of the realms of experience anyway, the realms of our own experience. We live through our perceptions. We create our perceptions of the world around us, and we inhabit them. And we take them all so solid, so real. But now that an entire lifetime of somebody is a memory. And we can think about that for ourselves as well. I think about that for myself. Who am I? Who was I? Looking at some of those photos, there was a young kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with a completely different body than this one, blonde, straight hair, that got bigger and bigger through the pictures, and got curly hair and a bushy beard, and then kind of morphed into middle age, and some photos with my mom in her last few weeks when I was a 61-year-old monk. And it's sort of like, oh, okay, well, who was all that? Who was that Glenn Thomas de Maria? Where is he now? It's just a memory. You can ask that of yourselves. Think back to your early life. Go through the various stages. You have a completely different body now. Body cells replace themselves more or less every 7 years. So you don't even have the same body that you had 7 years ago. Who was Lee Mintz? I remember a Lee Mintz that had big bushy dark hair, and some 15, 20 years younger than he is now. And who was he before that? Or Ty Krug, or Nick Teal, or Josh Dultz, and one of the rest of you sitting here. Who were you? Where were you? I don't even remember Tansampano's name. I just remember some Korean monk that showed up at Abhayagiri. Where did they go? Just memories. Debbie Stamp, I remember. 30 years ago at least. Where did she go? So these are just questions for reflection, to challenge our assumptions of the world we create around us. How real is it? How solid is it? We take it on as so real, so solid. But really, everything before this very moment is just a memory. Everything into the future is just a projection. It's constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly shifting. Why do we take it all so seriously? For my mother, there's no more memories. If her underlying tendencies got reborn somewhere else, which they probably did, she, in quotes, is continuing another existence. Some 6 years later, if she got rebirth into the human realm again, then sitting somewhere 6 years old somewhere, probably. She has no memory of Glandimaria. So we look at the quality of our life and how that's shaped by our perceptions too. And a lot of the Buddha's teachings are instructing us to take a look at our perceptual world, the reality that we've assumed into existence. And what's the quality of it? And really to encourage us to stop identifying with all of these constructs, to let the sense of ownership in me and identification fade away. Because when we take on those structures as who we are or who they are, or concretize our reality, that's the basis for suffering. And all the Buddha's teachings point towards how do we recognize this process of dukkha arising, and how can we reshape our perceptions, in a sense, in such a way that we can start to experience a relaxation of that dukkha, of that grasping, that grip, of the cycles of suffering that we keep on engaging in, based a whole lot on mistaken perceptions. Perceptions are based on memory, sanya, perception, the aggregate sanya, something that we can strongly identify with. But what is that? Perception is one of the translations. Recognition, I think, is maybe even a better one in some ways, in that all of our perceptions, the ways that we actually experience the world, are through filters. Recognition, filters that go back to identifying some related experience or something that's happened in the past that we can put some sort of handle on, and label and categorization, to help create, a sense of continuity in our reality. We need perceptions we need sanya to navigate through the world and not go insane with just lots of stimulation. So we assign meaning to these memories and these experiences. Felt meaning is another translation that I think Ajahn Sucitto likes to use. Felt meaning, but recognition is cognizing. It's a cognizing process, but it's recognizing based on memories, and that helps us to create categories of that person, or this situation, or this structure that I'm living in. So that's kind of what we do to get through life without kind of cracking up. But the way we do it is up to us. And so many times we create perceptual patterns that just result in suffering. So one of the teachings, as I was saying, one of the teachings that the Buddha gives us is how to work with perceptions to reconstruct them in ways that are more suitable for living a happy life, for living a contented life, for letting go of dukkha. One of the retreat themes that we're doing for our readings, we're going through the fourth Satipatthana, and we've started the section on the five hindrances with a number of readings over the past few days, discussing what the five hindrances are and how we can work with them in both our meditation and just in our lives. And you can see how these are patterns, these five hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, agitation, restlessness, and doubt. You can see how they are kind of embedded habits that rise up when we're in contact with the world in various different ways. And how these are unpleasant kinds of ways of operating in the world when we operate through craving or aversion or confusion, the root causes of these five hindrances, how they lead to the experience of dukkha. They're unsatisfactory, they're unpleasant, and the wish is to kind of be free from them, and how we respond and experience the world and respond to the presence of those five hindrances, the perception of these qualities, these patterns. That's another word for perception, is patterns. Kind of drives our whole life. And we can choose to change that. The Buddha says that we can, through appropriate attention, we can change our perceptual patterns so that we don't experience the world in the same way. For instance, we don't have to experience the world through the five hindrances. We don't have to go seeking sensual pleasure just to have a moment of peace. Sense desire is one of them, is that first hindrance, and we kind of think that going for sensual pleasure is something that's enjoyable, and to a certain extent it is, but the actual experience of sensual desire, I find quite unpleasant. There's an agitating quality to it, to wanting something. It's when you compare it to a peaceful, contented mind, the arising of sensual desire, even if it gets something in the sensual realm that's quote-unquote pleasant, the actual goal is to get rid of the unpleasant feeling of wanting. And then we do get some pleasure, and it goes away very quickly. So all in all, the pursuit of sensual pleasure because of sensual desire is not actually very gratifying in the long term. And it's obvious, I think, the dukkha that comes with aversion, or the dukkha that comes with just dullness, drowsiness, and restlessness, the uncomfortableness of those qualities of mind, and the agitation and confusion and wavering of doubt. These are unpleasant experiences. And they're unpleasant ways of perceiving the world, of living in the world. But they're kind of default patterns that we've learned through habit over many years in our lives, or many lifetimes. And we can start to undo them and reconstruct them, reconstructing our perceptual patterns. And if we can do that, we also become a whole lot more pleasant to be around. Imagining we all know what it's like to be around somebody who's consumed with craving or consumed with aversion, or is, just agitated, restless, doubtful, low energy. those are draining people exhibiting those, or when we're around people who are experiencing those and displaying those, it's hard to be around, just as it's hard to be around ourselves when we're experiencing them. So it's a gift to the world as well as a gift to ourselves if we can help reconstruct some of these patterns. And we've talked a lot about the need to recognize them first as they arise in our practice and in our lives. Because we can't just pretend they're not there, or just try and paint over them, or try and nullify them, or annihilate them. It doesn't work. We have to first experience them. That's the training in the fourth Satipatthana, is to experience, know when they're present, and know in a very deep sense, not just be aware of them and then try and get rid of them, trying to annihilate them, but to know them directly, not to know them conceptually, at least not to stop there, but to allow oneself a direct experience of the hindrance. How does it feel in the body? How does it manifest in the mind, the heart? What are the qualities of it? Is it sukha or is it dukkha? Is it pleasant or is it unpleasant? Does it arise to suffering? Does it cause the arising of suffering? So to know that's knowing the First Noble Truth. We have to know and understand the actual presence of dukkha. And after we've seen and validated that experience, whatever hindrance it is that might be popping up, then we can start to look at how we want to be with that, to understand it, and in some cases to offer up an antidote to it, in some cases to reframe it in terms of how it's arising, passing away, as some of the readings that we've recently had point to. But if we choose the first option of looking at what an alternative is, that's the reframing of our perceptions. So we can choose to look at an experience in a different way and turn it around through the various techniques, reflections that we've talked about. And that's considered letting go of inappropriate attention and engaging in appropriate attention, like we've talked about, say, the Asubha Kammatthana as an antidote to sensual desire, or recollections, developing perceptions of goodwill, kindness in relation to the hindrance of aversion. So we can recreate our responses to the world around us, and we can suppose into reality something that's a whole lot more pleasant to be with. It's still a constructed reality when we do that, when we recreate our perceptions and try and untangle some of the patterns, create more skillful ones. We're still fabricating our reality, and it's something that we'll still need to let unravel completely in our pursuit of deconstructing our whole, way of being in the world, to allow something much more sublime and insightful and penetrating, leading to the ending of dukkha. But it's something that really helps along the way, because that mind that has been reprogrammed, repatterned into more pleasant, open, expansive states of mind is one that can see the Dhamma that much more clearly. So it's there's a kind of technique that I've used over the past number of years, a meditation, essentially kind of a guided meditation that I've talked about before, so sorry if this is repetitive to you, you can just listen quietly. But a way of bringing up some skillful perceptions of the opposites of these 5 hindrances and experiencing them just as a potential, sort of like, what would it feel like? What would it feel like if I were free from sensual desire, if I didn't want anything? And the recording that I think it was Ajahn Panyo played from Ajahn Sona pointed directly at this. I was really enjoying that and excited to hear him talk about it in that way, because it's a technique that, or reflection, I guess, that I've used for a while to good benefit. And that's examining what it feels like when the mind is free from sensual desire. And one word that comes up is contented, not wanting. But contentment is a lovely word. And what's it like? We've all had experiences of moments of contentment when we don't want anything, when desire isn't arising, and we're at peace. The mind isn't surging out towards picking up some sort of sensory experience in the realm of sights or sounds or tastes, tactile sensations, those kinds of things. The mind is at rest and just absolutely happy just with what is happening right now. That's a really nice feeling. So just imagine what that's like, even for a moment. You can imagine that contented. Or what's it like to be free from ill will or aversion? You know, when we have let go of something that we were gnawing on for a long time, some memory of some conversation or some constructed perception of a person that's giving us a hard time or who has given us a hard time, and kind of realize the dukkha in that and let it go, or establish an alternative perception, picking up an image of something that brings a sense of kindness or gentleness. Whether it can be done with that particular person or not, that's one thing, but we can shift our thinking process to an image or a person who brings up a sense of kindness, a feeling of openness and gentleness, open-heartedness, well-wishing. We can tag it with a name like metta, loving-kindness, or gentle, just the quality that it evokes inside your experience. What's a good word to describe that sense for yourself? Come up with your own vocabulary word. A surefire one for me, just thinking about my mother again. I was thinking about that earlier today when I was going through some of those photos, particularly the ones in her later years. Most of my memories are gelled in towards her later years. Was one at the nursing home. A particular event, an image that's very much embedded in my mind. We never had a super close relationship until the later years of her life, when we both mellowed. And we were sitting in the nursing home. She was kind of in moderate dementia, moderate delirium, and was kind of sitting across a table from me. We had a few other people around, my sister and one of the nurses, and she was kind of out of it. And we were all talking, engaging, in chatter. And we were talking about Mom, and at one point I was just asking her how she was doing. How you doing, Mom? Because I wasn't sure whether she was present or not. she kind of didn't look very alert, and didn't really engage, and I caught her eye and I said, "Are you following all of this? Are you following any of this?" And she just looked a little confused. And then I said, "Do you know who I am?" And she had kind of a momentary look of confusion, but then all of a sudden she pulled into like 100% presence. Her big blue eyes just stared out through her kind of wrinkled face, 92-year-old face, and she penetrated right over to my eyes, and then she just, in this unusual moment of clarity, she just looked at me very directly and said, "You are mine." And my heart just melted. It's just so, just so what a mother is supposed to say. And so it's a lasting memory. And if I'm in a moment of aversion or, going through a rough patch or something like that, if I can bring that memory up, it just sort of immediately washes all that away. And then I don't feel aversion anymore. I feel kindness, gentleness. The world has opened up. So we can change our perceptions on the spot sometimes, in a moment, by having a vocabulary word or an image that we can just pull up. We reconstruct our perceptions. That's changing a perceptual pattern by imagining that. What would it be like to be free from ill will? What would it be free like to be free from dullness and drowsiness? What's it like to have a fresh, alert mind? So bring that up. Alert. To say the word alert, fresh. Feel the image that brings up. Cool and spacious. Or if we're feeling agitated, what's the opposite like? What's it like when you're not agitated? Still, silent, quiet. We've all had moments of peace, even if they've been very fleeting for some. What's the feeling that stillness brings into your perceptual experience? Or what's it like to be free from doubt? One feels secure. Relief. Grounded. Stable. What does that feel like in the body and in the mind? Saying that word, secure, stable, unwavering. So these are ways that we reconstruct this perceptual patterns, particularly in relation, say, to these 5 hindrances. Make them a meditation. Make the opposites of the hindrances a meditation. After we've gone through and maybe identified what the hindrances are that are present and experienced them directly, make a meditation of bringing up perceptions of their opposites. You can just do that as almost a mantra, and get your words down that work for you, and take a few moments after you've started sitting, take a few moments to say, okay, what's it like to be contented? Contented. Gentle. Alert. Silent, still. Secure. And then watch what happens to the mind space, watch what happens to the heart. Opens, relaxes, settles. And then there's the opportunity to be present with the breathing, just something simple, soothing. If the mind's not agitated from one of the hindrances, but more experiencing these positive qualities. This is the happy mind that composes itself easily. Freedom from the hindrances through reestablishing our perceptual patterns. And again, to remind oneself, this isn't who we are, even in the most positive sense. We don't need to take ownership of that and say, oh, finally, I've gotten rid of my self that was full of hindrances, and now I am someone who is full of these other qualities, these positive qualities. We're not trying to, construct an identity around them either, but we're just trying to temporarily fabricate skillful states that can lead us to more of a deeper understanding, create the mind space that can then understand the arising, passing of the world around us, and how to deconstruct all of our perceptions, all of our patterns. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to start by recognizing that which obstructs us, these obstructions, and then how to repattern in a way that opens, relaxes, and makes life enjoyable. We have to enjoy life as we go along. We're still engaged with it, even though we're working towards deconstructing how we actually view the world and ourselves, quote unquote, within it. But we have to have patterns that are pleasant to be with. And then we can live with ourselves as we go through the process so much more easily and enjoy the process rather than making it any kind of drudgery or work. And then that's an example for others too. We become a whole lot easier to be around if we can work through our patterns and create skillful ones that displays itself to the world around us. And it demonstrates to other people that it can work, that it can happen. It gives other people hope. That's how we naturally want to be, is this kind of living in the world with this kind of ease of mind, and that's by doing that. That's how we can help other people the most. And we can't really help other people fully until we've let go of all of these selfing patterns. We've got to get out of the way if we really want to be of service to the world, service to our friends, service to our family. The best work we can do is to learn how to create this sense of contentment and happiness completely in ourselves. And then we can bring that to the world. So that's my aspiration anyway. That's why it keeps me here after 25 plus years. Still lots of work to do, but lots of benefits that I've gained along the way. Gives one hope and faith for inspired for the future. Keep going. So just a few thoughts on perceptions, 5 hindrances, and working with them and working to replace them with pleasant, skillful states of mind. So I'll leave it there for tonight's reflection.